At my granddaughter's wedding, her groom called me worthless, so I ended his career the next day. On the most important day of my granddaughter's life, her groom thought he could humiliate me in front of everyone. "You're worthless. You shouldn't even be here," he said, thinking no one would have the courage to react. He underestimated me. What he didn't know is that I knew exactly who he was and what he was hiding. In less than 24 hours, he lost everything: his position, his prestige, and my granddaughter's trust. This is the story of how I transformed humiliation into silent justice and proved that underestimating a grandmother can be very, very expensive. This isn't just about revenge. It's about protecting family, exposing truth, and showing that respect isn't optional. It's earned and required. By the time I was done, he understood that you don't mess with grandmothers who've spent a lifetime learning how the world really works. Subscribe for stories of justice, family protection, and never underestimating elders. The humiliation. When a groom makes the worst mistake of his life. My name is Margaret Elaine Crawford. I'm 68 years old, and at my granddaughter's wedding last June, her groom made the fatal mistake of calling me worthless in front of 100 guests. 24 hours later, his career was destroyed, his reputation was in ruins, and my granddaughter was thanking me for saving her from what would have been the biggest mistake of her life. This is the story of how I transformed a moment of public humiliation into justice, and why you should never, ever underestimate a grandmother who spent 7 decades learning how the world really works. Let me give you context. My granddaughter Emily is 26 years old, brilliant, beautiful, and kind to a fault. She graduated from Boston College with honors, works as a marketing director for a tech startup, and has always been the light of our family. I raised Emily and her younger brother after their parents. My daughter Caroline and her husband died in a car accident when Emily was 12. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, stepping into the role of parent at age 54. But I did it because family is everything. Emily and I are close. Not just grandmother-granddaughter close, but genuinely connected. We talk almost daily. She asks my advice on everything from career decisions to what dress to wear to important meetings. So when she started dating Bradley Thornton 2 years ago, she was excited to introduce us. Bradley was 31, a financial analyst at one of Boston's prestigious investment firms. Harvard MBA. Came from money. Old New England family, trust fund, the works. Handsome in that polished country club way. Confident to the point of arrogance. From the moment I met him, something felt off. It wasn't anything obvious. He was polite to me, charming even. But there was something in his eyes when he looked at Emily. Not love, but possession. Like she was a trophy he'd won. And when he looked at me, there was thinly veiled condescension. Like I was some quaint old woman he had to tolerate to keep Emily happy. I tried to talk to Emily about my concerns. "Sweetheart, are you sure about Bradley? He seems controlling." "Grandma, he's not controlling. He's just confident. He knows what he wants." "Does he respect your opinions? Does he listen when you talk?" "Of course he does. You're just being overprotective." Maybe I was. Or maybe I'd lived long enough to recognize the signs of a man who saw women as accessories rather than equals. They got engaged last December. Bradley proposed at some expensive restaurant with a ring that cost more than most people's cars. Emily called me crying with happiness. I smiled and congratulated her, but my gut told me this was a mistake. Still, I kept my mouth shut. Sometimes you have to let people make their own choices, even when you know they're wrong. All you can do is be there to help pick up the pieces afterward. The wedding was planned for June at a historic estate in the Berkshires. Big affair, 150 guests, expensive venue, all the trappings of a society wedding. I helped where I could. Emily wanted me involved, and despite my reservations about Bradley, I wasn't going to let her down. We went dress shopping together. I helped with seating arrangements. I even hosted the bridal shower at my home. Bradley barely acknowledged my existence during the planning process. When Emily would mention something I'd suggested, he'd dismiss it. "That's a bit old-fashioned, don't you think?" Or, "Let's go with something more modern." It was clear. He didn't value my input because he didn't value me, but I kept quiet, for Emily's sake. The wedding day arrived. Beautiful June afternoon, perfect weather. The estate looked like something out of a magazine. I wore an elegant navy dress, appropriate for the mother of the bride's role I was filling. Emily looked absolutely stunning in her gown. For a moment, watching her get ready, I could almost forget my reservations about Bradley. "Grandma, thank you for everything," she said, hugging me. "I couldn't have done this without you. I love you, sweetheart. I just want you to be happy." I am happy. Bradley is amazing. I know you have your doubts, but I promise he's perfect for me. I held my tongue. This was her day. I wasn't going to ruin it with warnings she wouldn't hear. And the ceremony went smoothly. Emily and Bradley exchanged vows. I cried, partly from joy for Emily, partly from worry about what she was committing to. The reception started beautifully. Cocktail hour, dinner, speeches. Emily's maid of honor gave a touching toast. Bradley's best man gave one of those generic, "I've never seen Brad happier" speeches. Then it was time for family photos. The photographer was gathering people for various combinations. Parents of the bride and groom, since Emily's parents were deceased, I was standing in that role along with Bradley's parents, Richard and Patricia Thornton. Patricia Thornton was something else. Mid-60s, dripping with jewelry, the kind of woman who treats service staff like they're invisible. She'd been cold to me from day one, making it clear she didn't think I was sophisticated enough for her son's wedding. We were posing for a photo when Patricia said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "It's such a shame Emily doesn't have her real mother here. Having a grandmother fill in is just, well, it's not the same, is it?" I felt the sting but kept my face neutral. I'm honored to be here for Emily in whatever capacity she needs. "Yes, well, let's hope you stay out of the way during the important photos. We want this to look dignified." Before I could respond, Bradley appeared. "Everything all right?" he asked, but he was looking at his mother, not me. "Just arranging photos, darling," Patricia said, "though I think we should do some with just our side of the family. More cohesive." I started to step back, trying to keep the peace, but Bradley grabbed my arm, not gently. "Actually, Margaret, my mother's right. We don't really need you in the family photos. You're not actually family. Not really." I stared at him. "Excuse me? You're Emily's grandmother. You did your part raising her after the accident. But this is about our new family now. Bradley and Emily Thornton. You're part of the old chapter." People were starting to stare. The photographer looked uncomfortable. "Bradley," I said quietly, "Emily asked me to be in these photos." "Emily asks for a lot of things out of obligation," he interrupted. "But we both know the truth. You're old, you're out of touch. And honestly," he leaned closer, his voice dropping but still audible to the dozen people nearby, "you're worthless. You shouldn't even be here. This is a celebration of our future, not a reminder of Emily's tragic past." The words hit like a physical blow. Worthless. Shouldn't even be here. I've lived through a lot in 68 years. I've buried a husband. I've buried a daughter. I've raised 2 children through tragedy and grief. I've built a successful career as a legal secretary, working my way up from nothing. And this privileged, arrogant boy called me worthless. I saw Patricia smirking. I saw other guests looking away, embarrassed but unwilling to intervene. I saw Emily across the room, laughing with friends, completely unaware of what was happening. For a moment, I was frozen, humiliated, hurt. And then something else took over, something cold and calculating. I looked Bradley Thornton directly in the eyes and smiled. Not a warm smile, a knowing smile. "You're absolutely right, Bradley. I shouldn't intrude on your special day. Please, continue with your photos." I walked away calmly, found my seat at a table in the back, sat down, took out my phone, and started making calls. You see, what Bradley didn't know, what no one at that wedding knew, was who I actually was. Margaret Crawford, grandmother and legal secretary, was the public version of my life. The respectable, quiet, unassuming woman who stayed in the background. But before I became a legal secretary, I was something else, an investigative researcher for one of Boston's top law firms. For 25 years, I dug up information on people, financial records, hidden assets, secret affairs, buried legal issues. I was very good at my job. I retired at 60 to focus on raising Emily and her brother, but I never lost my skills or my contacts. And when Emily first introduced me to Bradley Thornton, My instincts told me to look into him, just to be safe, just to make sure my granddaughter wasn't getting involved with someone dangerous. What I found was interesting. Also, I made 3 phone calls from that wedding reception. The first was to a former colleague who now works in financial compliance at the SEC. Tom, it's Margaret. Remember that information I sent you 6 months ago about potential insider trading at Thornton & Associates? I think it's time to act on that. The second was to a journalist friend at the Boston Globe. Linda, you asked me about Bradley Thornton last year for that investigative piece you were working on. I have confirmation and additional evidence. Are you still interested? The third was to a lawyer I'd worked with for decades. Richard, I need you to draft a very detailed letter, and I need it delivered tomorrow morning. I sat at that table, watching Emily dance with her new husband, and felt no guilt whatsoever. He called me worthless. He said I shouldn't be there. He was about to learn exactly how much I was worth. Chapter 2. The Reckoning. When a grandmother dismantles a career in 24 hours. Let me tell you what I'd discovered about Bradley Thornton during my investigation. On the surface, he was exactly what he appeared to be. Successful financial analyst, Harvard MBA, respected position at his family's investment firm. But beneath the surface, Bradley was a fraud. First, the Harvard MBA. Technically true, he graduated. What he didn't advertise was that he'd been on academic probation twice and had multiple complaints filed against him for plagiarism. He'd graduated, yes, but barely, and only because his family donated a new building to the business school. Second, his position at Thornton & Associates, his father's firm. He was listed as a senior financial analyst. His actual work? Minimal. He showed up late, left early, and spent most of his time networking at country clubs. His salary, $350,000 annually, was pure nepotism. Third, and most damning, he was engaging in insider trading. I'd uncovered this 6 months earlier when Emily mentioned that Bradley had been bragging about his incredible investment returns. Curious, I looked into his trading patterns. What I found was textbook insider trading. Bradley had access to confidential information through his position at the firm. Information about upcoming mergers, acquisitions, and financial changes at major companies. He was using that information to make trades in his personal account before the information became public. It wasn't massive. He was smart enough to keep it under the radar, but it was illegal. Very illegal. I'd documented everything, specific trades, dates, the confidential information he had access to, and the timing of his transactions. I'd compiled it into a detailed report and sent it to my contact at the SEC, but I'd asked him to hold off on action, just in case, just until I was sure about Bradley's character. Bradley's behavior at the wedding removed any doubt. The phone calls I made from the reception set 3 things in motion. First, the SEC investigation. By Monday morning, 2 days after the wedding, the SEC opened a formal investigation into Bradley Thornton's trading activities. They had my report, they had the evidence, and they had jurisdiction. Bradley's assets were frozen pending the investigation. His trading accounts were locked, and most importantly, Thornton & Associates was notified that one of their analysts was under investigation for securities fraud. Second, the media exposure. The Boston Globe ran a front-page story Monday morning. Privilege and fraud, how one Boston analyst's insider trading went unchecked. The article detailed Bradley's trading patterns, his family connections, his inflated position at the firm, and the culture of entitlement that had allowed him to operate without oversight. My journalist friend Linda had been working on this story for months, but had been missing key evidence. I'd just handed it to her. Third, the legal letter. Monday morning, Bradley received a letter from one of Boston's most prominent law firms. The letter outlined, in explicit detail, every instance of his insider trading, every violation of SEC regulations, and every piece of evidence that could be used in both criminal and civil proceedings. The letter concluded with an offer: cooperate fully with authorities, resign from Thornton & Associates, and accept a settlement that would bar him from working in finance ever again, or face criminal prosecution that would almost certainly result in prison time. The letter was signed by 3 senior partners, and at the bottom, in small print, investigation compiled by Margaret E. Crawford, senior research consultant. Emily called me at 9 a.m. Monday morning, hysterical. Grandma, something terrible is happening. Bradley's been accused of insider trading. The SEC is investigating him. It's all over the news. His father is furious. They're saying he might go to prison. Oh my goodness, I said, my voice full of concern. That's awful, sweetheart. How is Bradley handling it? He's a mess. He says it's all a misunderstanding, that someone set him up, that— She paused. Grandma, he keeps saying someone from the wedding must have reported him. He thinks it was one of the guests who has it out for him. That seems unlikely, dear. If he's being investigated, it must be based on actual evidence, not just rumors. But the timing is so weird. Why would this come out the day after our wedding? I let the silence hang for a moment. Then, gently, Emily, have you considered that maybe the timing isn't coincidental? That maybe whoever reported this waited until after the wedding so you'd have a chance to enjoy your day before learning the truth about who you married? Another pause. What are you saying? I'm saying that people who love you sometimes have to make difficult decisions to protect you, even if it means revealing truths you didn't want to know. Grandma. Her voice was smaller now, scared. Did you do this? I met Emily at my house that afternoon. Just the two of us. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red, her face puffy. She looked at me with confusion and betrayal. Tell me the truth. Did you report Bradley? Yes. How could you? On my wedding day. You ruined everything. I protected you from something that would have ruined your life. That was my choice to make. No, sweetheart. When someone is committing crimes, reporting it isn't a choice. It's an obligation. And when that someone is treating the people you love with contempt, exposing them is an act of love. He made some bad investments. That doesn't make him a criminal. He didn't make bad investments, Emily. He engaged in insider trading. He used confidential information from his position to make illegal trades. That's a federal crime. And if I hadn't reported it, eventually someone else would have. And you'd be tied to him legally, financially, possibly even criminally. I showed her the evidence, all of it. The trading patterns, the dates, the confidential information he'd had access to, the profits he'd made illegally. She stared at the documents, her face going pale. I've been investigating him for 6 months, I said quietly. From the moment I met him, something felt off, so I did what I've always done. I looked for the truth, and I found this. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have believed me? 6 months ago, when you were in love and planning your wedding, if I'd come to you with accusations against Bradley, would you have listened? Or would you have thought I was being a paranoid, overprotective grandmother? She didn't answer. We both knew she would have dismissed it. I waited. I continued. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped Bradley would prove me wrong. But at the wedding, when he grabbed my arm and called me worthless, when he said I shouldn't even be there, I knew exactly who he was, and I knew I had to act. He said that to you? Emily's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. Grandma, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. You were enjoying your wedding, as you should have been. That's why I didn't make a scene. That's why I waited until afterward to make the calls. Tears were streaming down Emily's face now. I married a criminal. I married someone who humiliated my grandmother at our wedding. What do? You get an annulment. Bradley's lawyer has already advised him to cooperate with authorities in exchange for avoiding prison. Part of that cooperation will be agreeing to an annulment on grounds of fraud. He married you under false pretenses, presenting himself as an honest businessman when he was actively committing crimes. It's that easy? The legal part will be relatively simple. The emotional part— I took her hand. That will be harder, but you'll get through it, and I'll be here every step of the way. Over the next 2 weeks, everything unfolded exactly as I'd planned. Bradley resigned from Thornton & Associates. The SEC investigation concluded that he'd engaged in insider trading over a 2-year period, generating approximately $480,000 in illegal profits. He agreed to pay restitution, fines totaling over $1 million, and accepted a lifetime ban from working in the securities industry. Criminal charges were dropped in exchange for his cooperation and full admission of guilt. The annulment was granted within a week. Emily had technically been married for less than a month. Bradley's reputation was destroyed. The society circles he'd moved in wanted nothing to do with a disgraced traitor. His trust fund was depleted by fines and legal fees. His future in finance was over. Emily moved back in with me temporarily while she processed everything and figured out her next steps. The one evening, about 3 weeks after the wedding, Emily and I were sitting on my porch drinking tea. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Were you planning this all along? The investigation, the timing, everything?" I considered how to answer. I was prepared for it. I'd done the research months ago, but I didn't want to use it unless I had to. I kept hoping Bradley would show his true character before the wedding, that you'd see it yourself and call things off. But he was careful around you. Charming. Attentive. But he wasn't careful around you. No, because he didn't respect me. He saw me as a powerless old woman who didn't matter. And that was his fatal mistake. The things he said to you at the wedding, they were unforgivable. Yes, but Emily, I need you to understand something. I didn't do this because he insulted me. I did it because he was a criminal who would have destroyed your life. The insult just removed any hesitation I had about timing. "Do you think he'll ever recover?" she asked. "Financially? Eventually, maybe. His family still has money. Reputation-wise? No. He'll always be known as the guy who committed insider trading and got caught. Career-wise? He's done in finance. He'll have to completely reinvent himself." "Good," she said quietly. Then, looking at me, "Is that wrong? To feel glad that he's suffering?" "You're not glad he's suffering. You're relieved that you escaped something that would have been so much worse if it had gone on longer. That's different." "I feel so stupid. I should have seen the signs." "You saw what you wanted to see. That's not stupid. That's human. We all do it when we're in love. You saw through him from the beginning." "I've had 68 years of practice reading people, sweetheart, and I wasn't blinded by love." A month after the wedding that wasn't, Emily received a letter. From Bradley. She brought it to me, unopened. "Should I read it?" "That's your choice. But if you want my opinion, he's probably looking for sympathy, trying to manipulate you into feeling sorry for him. Be prepared for that." She opened it, read silently, then handed it to me. The letter was exactly what I'd expected. A self-pitying attempt at manipulation. He blamed the pressure of his family, the culture of the firm, the gray area of financial regulations. He said he'd made mistakes, but wasn't a bad person. He said he still loved Emily and hoped someday she could forgive him. Not once did he apologize for calling me worthless. Not once did he acknowledge how he'd treated me at the wedding. Emily watched my face as I read. "What do you think?" "I think he's exactly who I thought he was. And I think you're well rid of him." She nodded slowly. "I'm not going to respond. There's nothing to say." "That's wise." She took the letter back and tore it into pieces. "Grandma, thank you. For protecting me. For doing what needed to be done even though it was hard. That's what family does, sweetheart." Epilogue. It's been 8 months now since the wedding that wasn't. Emily is thriving. She got promoted at work. She's dating someone new. A genuinely kind person who treats her with respect, and notably, treats me with respect too. Bradley's life has taken a very different trajectory. He's working in his uncle's car dealership in Vermont, selling used cars. Last I heard, he was barely making ends meet after his legal expenses and fines. Thornton and Associates quietly removed him from their website and all promotional materials. His father, Richard, retired shortly after the scandal, though he claimed it was unrelated. Patricia Thornton no longer hosts her famous charity galas. Turns out, people in society circles don't want to associate with a family tainted by securities fraud. As for me, I'm 68 years old, supposedly worthless and not even supposed to be at family functions. But I ended a career in 24 hours. I exposed fraud that might have taken years for authorities to uncover on their own. I protected my granddaughter from a marriage that would have destroyed her. So yes, Bradley Thornton, I'm absolutely worthless. Just ask your career how worthless I am. The final lesson. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about protection, about justice, and about respect. Bradley made a crucial error. He assumed that because I was older, quieter, and in a supporting role rather than a starring role, I was powerless. He forgot that grandmothers have lived entire lifetimes. We've accumulated knowledge, skills, contacts, and most importantly, wisdom about how the world actually works. We're not powerless. We're just patient. We pick our battles. We wait for the right moment. And when that moment comes, We act with precision. To anyone watching this who's ever underestimated someone because of their age, their position in the family, or their quiet demeanor, be careful. The person you dismiss as worthless might be the person who ends your career while sipping tea and smiling politely. And to the grandmothers watching, never forget your power. You've lived too long, learned too much, and loved too fiercely to let anyone tell you you're worthless. You're not worthless. You're priceless. And anyone who forgets that does so at their own peril. My name is Margaret Elaine Crawford. I'm 68 years old. I raised my granddaughter with love and dedication. And when her groom called me worthless at her wedding, I reminded him, and everyone watching, exactly what a grandmother is worth. Everything.